Just want to know whether Yoav is in the pink room.
Does Yoav still have the pink room, or did Yoav move or change? Or I haven't seen the pink room in a while.
The pink room exists. It's just downstairs.
This is persist. Actually, needs to be first. So, Charles, if I rearrange it in Data Tracker, is it going to be dynamic in Meet Echo the next time I go to? Is it that cool? People are sending stuff to me right now.
Yeah, I believe so.
You're sending stuff to me right now?
No, people are sending stuff to me right now, and it needs to go once it's done.
Yeah, if you put it in order of merit, it's
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, like your things.
New slides.
Oh, yeah. There's a delay though. So when you try and pull it up out of Meet Echo, it may not be enough. You might have to load it.
Yeah, it's only a few minutes. It will be up by the time we get to that presentation.
All right.
You just make Meet Echo load it again.
There's a button for that.
There's a
Shift reload.
It's probably not that one. Oh, maybe it is that one. Okay. Like locally in my browser. Okay, there's still a couple people coming in the back, and then we can probably get going.
It's changes they made or if it's my browser.
I just wonder if you knew about it, then you could save me some time.
No, did you write a message? Did you write a message?
I don't know what's going
I'm supposed to be making your amendment. This is the same thing.
All right, Yoav, shall we? Do you want to kick us off here?
Sure. Might as well start. So, welcome all to the ACME session at IETF 124. This session is being recorded. Let's go to the next slide. So this is our new Notewell. Used to be 2 slides, now it's 1 with a QR code that will take you to all the good things relevant. We'll see that the anti-harassment stuff is now before the intellectual property right stuff, but the order does not mean it's either more or less important.
And I do want to remind this working group that we are here to debate ideas. We are here to debate technical merits. Technical merits of drafts are up for debate. The authors and their intent and their knowledge and their experience is not up for debate. Please be respectful of each other. Thank you.
Okay, let's go next slide. So if you're remote like me, make sure that your audio and video are off unless you are sharing or presenting, as I am doing now, and use a headset. It's very highly recommended. This tool does not work well with people just yelling at their computer. If you're in person, make sure you signed into the session via Data Tracker. Remote participants don't need to because our presence is recorded. And use Meet Echo or the light Meet Echo to join the mic queue and to participate in a show of hands. And as always, keep the audio and video off if you're on site. Next. Okay, so we've done the Notewell. I will be monitoring the chat room. Mike, do we have scribes?
I don't think we have note takers yet.
I mean, there is some AI that is listening in, but I haven't seen it work.
I'm doing it so far.
Okay, great. Thanks, Aaron.
It's always better to get a
And-
second note taker if we have a second person to help Aaron, especially when Aaron is speaking. Can I get a second volunteer? John Gray, thank you.
Right. We'll have the document status. Here's a list of draft of documents that are with the ISG. Actually, DTN Node ID is no longer in the hands of the ISG. It's in the RFC editor's queue, and actually, it's in OFF 48. And we have adopted drafts and presentations for many of them. So, Mike, would you like to continue?
Yeah, so we'll go through the received slides in this order. Except I have received one agenda bash from Peter Liu that he's in the SATP session and has asked that the ACME rats go at the very end. He'll hope to present there and then come here. Are there any other agenda bashes? If not, then, and this is where I'm going to show my ignorance. How do I change the slides?
You're on the clicker right now. You have
Sorry?
a clicker. It's on the clicker.
There's the share slides button right next to all the other ones.
It'll just automatically cycle to the next. No,
No, it will give you a menu.
Close that one.
No, that doesn't work for me.
Take back slide control.
Yes, take that slide control.
Sorry for the technical issues here. Stop slides, new slides. Yeah. And what did we have first? Is that first? I don't think that was first. Sorry. DNS persist. DNS persist. This was Shiloh presenting?
Now you can pass slide control.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
On there. We'll talk about
Take it away, sir.
All right, we are talking about the internet draft for DNS persist, and it's myself. I'm Shiloh Hyrick with Fastly, Henry Burge Lee, and Michael Slaughter. Brief status update. The ACME working group adopted the draft on October 16th. It's now draft IETF ACME DNS persist. The CAB forum passed ballot SC88V3 on October 9th. So that was the permission to use this type of validation. And by November 9th, we would expect the IP rights review to be completed for that. We have some implementation commitments for DNS persist. Fastly's certainly, and Let's Encrypt both use Boulder, and we anticipate that being implemented next year. Amazon is assessing the challenge for their use. And there are interoperable POCs of this challenge type in both Pebble and forks of Pebble and the egg sampler ACME client. The way DNS persist works is there is a validation persist subdomain that is a standardized label for that. It contains the CA identifier and the account binding as the data in the TXT record. It also provides for two optional parameters, the persist until and policy parameters allow for overrides of expiration and optional scope, which one scope is defined currently, which is a policy of wildcard. The reasons for creating this are that there are a number of challenges with with ACME challenges. The TLS and HTTP challenges have issues with port access and as well as blocking at per geo area, and they cannot be used to validate wildcard domains. DNS-01 has DNS propagation delays, as well as complex automation because you're interacting with both the ACME server and DNS. And also your risk of compromise is increased by having the API keys for both DNS and ACME in the same place. DNS and account 01 is an ID that provides for account scope labels, and it helps with collisions, but it does not deal with persistence. And then the primary workaround for this type of need currently is using CNAMEs, which create the collision problem inherent in using CNAMEs, and also add single points of failure and some vulnerabilities. So one question is why should this be a standard in the first place? Well, with SC88, CAs can check persistent DNS records that are outside of ACME, but then that bypasses the protocol's challenge negotiation, and standardization would allow us to actually have proper protocol integration and deal with this use case. So the key insight for DNS persists is that the ACME account URIs provide a durable, cryptographically secure binding. And so this allows the durable identity to be the account URI. This prevents the unauthorized use of this via DNS alone, and it survives account key rotation since the account URI doesn't change, and there are no new trust anchors introduced into the system. The per issuer TXT records allow you to have multiple CAs with authorizations, and no coordination is required between the CAs because the domain owners can get to control that. The flexibility that it provides are things like persist until, which lets you to set an explicit expiration timestamp for the authorization, and adding the policy allows you to provide for subdomain coverage for wildcards. In order to provide for future extensions, the unknown parameters are ignored. There's some security constraints built in, such as that the DNS TTL must be respected, and the policy, the CA policy limits still apply, like the CAP form certificate lifetimes. And DNSSEC is recommended, although not currently required. There are a couple of active discussions in the working group, and they are categorized into security trade-offs. And that is this is essentially a big trade-off here where we are trading freshness for operational simplicity. And it forces your account key to become your long-lived credential. If you have a key compromise of your ACME account key, it becomes more serious than when you are not using a persistent validation type. The account URI being exposed in the public DNS is a privacy concern, and the validation reuse period is calculated by the shortest of the DNS record TTL, the persist until parameter, and the policy. And then regarding DNSSEC validation, the draft currently states that the CA should validate signatures, but one option being discussed is a must use a validating resolver. And that's a trade-off between security versus the flexibility to be used in private PKIs and not just the web PKI. The draft evolved from draft S hierarch ACME DNS persist by adding just-in-time validation. So that allows the server to check upon an authorization request to see if the DNS records exist, and then it will bypass the challenge flow. And there's a larger security considerations section that discusses risks and how the account binding and subdomain validation security implications, and several other things like long TXT record guidance and error handling for syntax versus authorization failures. So some of the things that we're looking for working group input on are DNSSEC requirement. Is it a should or a must validate? What other security considerations are important? And what kind of timeline is this going to be worked on in? And then there's a currently open-ish PR in the GitHub repo that we're discussing, which is allowing multiple URIs per account, which could allow for EAB and privacy controls, but it adds some complexity. So the path forward that we're looking at is getting feedback from this session and incorporating it. Again, expanding the security considerations as well, figuring out the account URI, multiple or single, and looking at use cases and concerns that are raised. Hopefully after a few revisions, we could get to working group last call and coordinate deployment with members of the CAB forum. So we're using the ACME mailing list. There is a GitHub repo that was just transferred to the working group, and the draft is on Data Tracker. So that's the end of the presentation material, and I'd like to see if there are any questions or discussion areas that people would like to raise.
Thank you, Shiloh. I don't see a mic queue. Maybe you could go back to the open questions and leave that up for a second. Maybe that will elicit a comment. Yeah, Tim?
Hi, Tim Gagan. I have a perhaps silly question. I was reading the draft just earlier today, and one thing that wasn't screamingly obvious to me from the draft is how cert renewal works. So the first time around, right, the requester has to arrange for or expect that the CAA record is in place. The CA checks it, figures out which ACME account is in place, and then hands out a cert. Great. But when the requester comes back to renew that cert, whatever 90 whatever days later, the CA re-verifies the CAA record. So okay. So there, I appreciate the answer, but it might be nice if the draft made it like painfully obvious what happens at initial issuance and at cert renewal.
Okay, great. I didn't actually hear what the response was to your question, but
the response was yes from right next to him. Tim Hollebeek, did you start?
Thanks.
Corey?
Corey Bonnell, DigiCert. Yeah, just the opinion on the DNSSEC requirement. I would keep it as a should. That gives flexibility for non-web PKIs. We already have, SC85 that passed at the CAB forum that's going to require DNSSEC validation in March. So making this a must doesn't really help anything for the web PKI. So I would just keep it, as is. Secondly, I would consider changing the way how the policy parameter works and maybe make a non-wildcard value, just because it seems a little strange to have like a parameter value with one set value that you always have to set. It'd be nice if there would be a way to like basically like a Boolean value or some other type of policy type you can set, just so then it might be easier to generate the record.
Okay, that makes sense.
Michael Richardson. So a question, I think I might have written an email or tried to about this. So what happens if some host within your zone decides to do DNS-01 or HTTP-01 auth? Is that permitted, encouraged, allowed, forbidden? Does the CAA record then decide if that could happen? Like, I don't even know if it's good or bad. I just want to know if. What happens?
So the question then is if this record, DNS persistent record, is in place for a zone, is DNS-01 permitted?
Yeah.
Still within that? I see.
Yeah.
Why
I mean,
would it not be permitted, I guess?
That's the question, right? Is there a situation in which this would be a bad thing, undesirable? Is this it might be that it's an undesirable thing, but we can't effectively prevent it, so we're going to tolerate it. Maybe it's a feature, not a bug. I just don't know about what happens in that scenario.
I have a direct response to this, if that's okay.
Yeah, please. Yep.
There is a separate draft in front of the LAMPS working group right now that establishes a form of CAA record that says you can only use these validation methods in order to confirm domain control validation over names in this subtree. And so the presence of this DNS persist text record doesn't mean you can't use HTTP-01 for this. But
Right.
The presence of that CAA record would mean you can't use HTTP-01 for this. So the two drafts sort of complement each other in that way.
Could that CAA record forbid DNS persist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, I would have to go check. The way that one is written, it doesn't like allow list HTTP-01, DNS-01, DNS persist-01. It's not like that. It's more policy focused, and it says like you can only use validation methods that meet these criteria. And I don't believe there is a toggle in there that says you can't use DNS persist, because DNS persist is one of the higher authorization methods in discussion right now.
Fair enough.
You can say you must use DNSSEC. You can say you must use DNS-based methods, no HTTP-based methods, etc.
So okay, that's fantastic. I just think that there will be some confusion, and part of the argument for this record is the web people don't talk to the DNS maintainer people, and so DNS-01 is hard to do, and blah blah blah. And so now I'm like, okay, but for that same reason, DNS persist may be hard for the marketing people to actually have, because it's not even hosted inside the company, and then they get toasted without knowing it, right? So that's kind of want to avoid that, so that there's an awareness of it's not forbidden, so it's allowed, and therefore it's allowed, right?
We are over time for this slot. Let's finish the queue if you can quickly, but I'd prefer discussion go to the list so we can move on. But those who are still in the queue, please go ahead.
I'm first. Stefan Ebbing, I was wondering if you are aware of the DNOps domain verification draft. It was not mentioned as far as I could search for it in the current draft of this draft. So there was another draft for ACME that mentioned the DNS verification draft. So might be useful to look at that.
All right, so our first draft did actually reference it as a non-normative reference, and it was very useful in constructing some of the syntax, but it didn't get incorporated as a normative requirement to this because it wasn't required really to understand this. But certainly that could be reevaluated, and it is highly related and overlapping in some areas.
It's good to know that you know about it, and that's all good for me. Thank you.
Hello, so I'm Deb Cooley. I'm your Sec AD. So I have two comments. One is when you make a should, it's fine, and DNSSEC should be a should. That's perfectly acceptable. You also need to put in there, when you get farther along in this draft, you're going to need to say when it's appropriate to should not. Like, so you can't have a should and not tell people where it's okay to violate the should. So when you don't have a DNSSEC enabled DNS, maybe you don't have a choice but to use it, right? So there has to be some construction, some words, something simple, doesn't have to be long and complex. But when you get to the ISG will say to you, why should, not must. And so you need to be able to say why this should be a should and not a must. So just think about it. You have plenty of time to think about that. This is just, this is your guidance for the day. The second comment I have is, we have drafts in 2 different working groups on CAA.
Well, LAMPS owns CAA, the CAA IANA.
Because it's PKIX.
Because that's where it was invented before ACME existed, I think.
And we're doing what with it?
Well, CAA is broader than just ACME.
Well, I know that.
This is actually a text record, not a CAA record.
Okay, good. Because, we don't need conflict. We just need to be careful here, right? So maybe you get 2 pieces of guidance in one day.
Thank you.
No, I know. I just want to be.
Aaron, do you want the last word, or were you in queue vestigially?
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay, Shiloh, does that give you the direction you needed to?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen and providing constructive feedback. That really helps a lot.
Excellent. Okay, next up is, quickly go back to my agenda. Next up is ACME profiles. Aaron.
Yeah, there we go. There's my controls. This should be real fast. Hi, everyone. Aaron Gable, Let's Encrypt, giving an update on draft ACME profiles. Since last IETF meeting, we had the call for adoption in August. During that call for adoption, there was discussion of whether some of the rules for how clients should behave should be shoulds or musts, and we downgraded a must to a should. Deb, I will take your comment into my own brain as well, and I will take a note to update, to add like one additional sentence about when a client might violate that should. And the when a client might violate that should is this next bullet, discussion of private profiles. Some people were interested in the idea that a CA might privately negotiate a set of profiles with specific clients that aren't advertised in the general directory. And that would be a situation in which the client would request a profile that is not advertised. As a result of that call for adoption, we created draft 00. As I was just mentioning, it updated that must to a should, and it slightly changed the format of the object that we're adding to the directory. Implementation status, implemented in 2 servers at the very least, both Pebble and Boulder. Implemented in 7 clients at least. I didn't list them all here because they're listed in the document itself, and most of them are listed in the slides from IETF 123. The big thing that I wanted to say here is that like Let's Encrypt is actively using this, and it is already proving very helpful for migrations. Let's Encrypt is removing the TLS client auth EKU from the default certificate profile and doing that by creating a new profile that doesn't have that EKU, letting people opt into that profile, then creating another profile that does have that EKU and removing the EKU from the default profile so that when the default changes, people who still desperately need that EKU can fix their situation by opting into the old profile or into this temporary profile that still has it. And then finally getting rid of that temporary sort of backstop profile. And so this sort of like 3-step process is allowing really smooth migration rollout plans to make these kinds of changes to default profiles. We're going to be doing the same thing for the migration to 47-day validity periods, where we offer shorter-lived certificates under a profile, then we change the validity period of the default profile later. And we're also realizing that it can do things like brownouts, where you just temporarily change the default profile to sort of fire a shot across the bow of clients that are renewing during that period, and then swap it back. So it's like a very small, minimal configuration change in order to change things about like your default issuance profile like that. So we're finding this very useful, and we're very happy with the state of things at the moment. Next steps. We'll fully admit that most of the profiles implementation has been driven by Let's Encrypt. Both servers that I know implement profiles are maintained by Let's Encrypt. We contributed profiles implementations to some of those 7 clients, I think 2 or 3, while others implemented it on their own. But we would love to hear more feedback from other server operators that are interested in this. So if you run your own ACME server and it's not based on the Boulder code base, like, please reach out, please implement this, please let us know what you think. We recognize it might not be useful for everyone, but if you think it might be useful for you, please give it a shot. And aside from that, we're just sort of letting it bake. Feedback is coming in very slowly because there's not a lot here. It's a very small draft. And so I expect it is quite stable at this point. But if things really need to change, we're happy to let it bake for a little bit longer. So obviously working group last call is eventually the next step, but I think it's sort of up to the working group how fast we want to push for that. That's it for me.
Thank you, Aaron. I will second your call for implementers to come forward with feedback. We're doing this, we're not doing this because this is useful, this is not useful because. You mentioned 2 servers and 7 clients are all happily working together?
Yep.
So that's more than sufficient for a PS, but if we get more is good, right? Please. I know we have in this room, we have other public CAs, we have other private CAs. Yeah, is this useful for ACME, please? We've still got 4 minutes on the timer for this.
Well, I aimed for 5 minutes for myself and 5 minutes for questions. So if there's no questions, I'll cede the floor.
Going once. Going twice, gone. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you all.
So next up on the agenda, in the order of adopted drafts, we had draft IETF ACME DNS account label. We have not received slides for this. I haven't had any communication from the authors. Maybe we'll put that to any other business if you have updates. There's also the adopted draft ACME client, which we are not discussing here. There's been some discussion on list, but we're going to defer that to a future meeting, which means we're into new business, candidates for adoption. So we'll start with Chris with the JWT claim considerations. Constraints.
Thank you.
We'll give you that. Which won't work
Hopefully
yet,
this should be short and sweet. We discussed this, I think, for two meetings.
Is he audible, or does he need to eat the mic more?
Bring it up, or I'll just hold it. That's better, I'm sure. Yeah, so we've talked about this, I think, for the past two meetings. I believe this is something that is pretty straightforward. As noted before, it's coming from the STIR working group as a dependency, and is essentially a new profile for authority token instead of TN-auth list, which was the original profile that was created for authority token. This is another STIR related X509 extension, JWT claim constraints, actually defined in the same RFC 8226. And it's meant for constraining claims as part of the JWT that's included as the passport framework in STIR. And recently, RCD, rich call data, was finalized. RCD has a specific framework for constraining claims. So this draft is and is actually being started to use in the industry. So this draft is pretty relevant and needed. Just for fun, I actually include a recent FCC FNPRM that actually references JWT claim constraints. So anyways, I think we got some editorial comments on the list and appreciate that, and certainly can quickly address those when adopted, but I feel like this is pretty straightforward. It was pretty much a copy and paste of TN-auth list, except for the new extension. We did, as discussed, talk about some situations when you have multiple authority tokens and you're responding to multiple challenges as well. So would love further feedback on that. But other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward and would love to call for adoption.
So I will apologize to the authors. I have fumbled this one on your behalf. We did a call for adoption already in September, and it was crickets. And I think in the chair handover in the summer, I didn't realize the history on this one. I didn't realize that Russ and Sean had spoken for this before I came into the chair role. So I think it probably should have been adopted in September based on its history, even though no one spoke to it on list. I don't know if Deb, if you want to comment on this situation. I think retroactively, the correct thing is just to adopt it.
If it generates crickets in the working group now, then I don't think the history matters that much. But since Deb is going to the mic, I'll shut up.
Right. So I think, so when we did this before, it took donkey's years for whatever reason. And B, I think we might have done more discussion about what this was for and why we were doing it. And this time I think it just sort of slid in maybe with a little less announcement. So, but because this is along the lines of RFCs we've already published, and that you're just adding another extension, right? Can you talk a little bit about who you expect to be implementing these extensions? It's not normal CAs like ACME, like Let's Encrypt and whatnot.
Right. It's specifically STIR CAs that support certificates in the STIR Shaken ecosystem. That's mandated in the U.S. and being supported by other countries as well. Yeah, we had a number of people at the last meeting that stood up, Russ and Sean, and obviously I'm supportive of this. I think Security also stood up as well. So I didn't bother to gather them again, but
do you have implementers? Like, are there vendors and software and running code and all that? That's sort of Deb's question, right?
Yeah. So I think the answer is yes, right? It's just not the normal it's not the normal people we normally see here, right? So what we need from the working group is reviews to make sure that you've got it constructed correctly.
Yeah.
And that it will be implementable by the people who won't be coming here because they don't belong to the IETF,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. The telco ecosystem is sort of followers rather than leaders.
Yeah, you
so-
tell them what to do and they do it.
Right.
Sort
pretty
of,
much.
hopefully. Right. So I think that's the situation. And it was the same situation when we adopted these to begin with. And that was before my time because those drafts
Right.
were already, Yoav probably knows, right?
And the TN auth list one is in very wide usage. It's actually
Right.
part of the authority of the governance of the U.S. stir shaken ecosystem.
Right. So what we
You
need
had an
from
FCC
ACME,
reference on your slide even.
Right, exactly.
so we need from ACME the willingness to review drafts or an extension that they may not use directly, but as part of the ACME working group, we want to make sure it's done correctly.
Correct.
And then you will get stir and shaken people to also review it and make sure it's what you really need.
Yes, we've discussed this in the STIR working group as well.
Yeah. So I think what you want to ask is whether people are willing to review this thing. And if it's true, then you can adopt, right?
Right. So question that Deb asked, do we have reviewers? Michael Richardson just put his hand up. Joe put his hand up. So, okay, if we can get expertise in this group to provide technical review of this document that the STIR people don't have, then that's the value we're providing here.
I mean, it's not long, right?
No.
Okay, perfect. So then
Right.
action for the minutes. Sorry, Aaron, please. Yes.
I just wanted to say really quick that I've read this draft multiple times, and I've also read the Tianopoulos one, and I think that all of the parts about like the ACME wire protocol make total sense. Everything about how to encode the identifier type, how it should be represented in a new order request, all of that makes complete and utter sense. And my mind goes blank when I get to the description of how to validate this identifier. Like the actual validation method feels so outside my ACME wheelhouse that I don't know what to do with that part of the document. And that's where a lot of my silence comes from, is I don't understand the STIR ecosystem well enough to know whether the validation protocol described here is actually good.
Yes, and that's part of the editorial comments we get, and probably we went a little overboard there. So certainly willing to simplify and make sure it's just ACME specific, and you can reference the other documents for the details of validation and all those things.
Okay, so there's definitely stuff to bike shed here on the readability of the draft.
Yep.
And that's good. So consider it adopted. Please submit a official adopted version.
Thank you.
Next up would be ACME Rats, but Peter's not in the room yet. So let's go to OpenID Federation.
So you're going to drive the slides?
I'm going to hand you this. Hold on. Not yet. There we go. Click. Go.
Yep, that works. Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for giving me some time here today. My name is Tim, and I work at the Internet Security Research Group, but I do not work on Let's Encrypt. The reason I'm making that point is that, like, one thing I want to be very crisp about is that nothing that I'm talking about in this deck has anything to do with Let's Encrypt, right? So just want to forestall those questions. Also, by the way, Aaron, you're still in queue, and I'm not sure if that's on purpose. All right, let's get into it. There we go. So what is OpenID Federation? OpenID Federation is a spec that's currently being developed at the OpenID Foundation, and it's a mechanism for building identity federations that scale, right? So there's a lot of concepts here that are going to be familiar to a room full of experts on the web PKI on an X509. In that what you have here is a way of doing like hierarchical trust, of having a root delegate trust from intermediate to a leaf. And you have mechanisms for sort of federating trust, right? Things akin to a cross sign from one state to another, or it can, and so on and so forth. But the key difference here though is that this is in the OpenID and like JOT sort of realm as opposed to X509 certs. So there isn't a perfect one-to-one mapping here, but like just to give everybody in this audience sort of a mental map of what we're talking here, I'm going to construct a loose analogy. So yeah, instead of an X509 or RFC 5280 certificate, you have a particular profile of a JOT that like identifies an entity and some metadata and puts there's a public key in there. Instead of a root certificate store that helps some entity decide whether or not it trusts something else, you have a trust anchor list. And then instead of doing a cross sign, you would have a subordinate statement where one entity would say, yeah, this intermediate, I will allow it to do certain things, and then you can trust it if you trust me. If you want to know more about OpenID Federation, a couple links here to like the draft specification from the OID Foundation and a YouTube video to talk from a recent conference of theirs, giving an overview. Okay, but the reason I'm here today is for cases where people want to use OpenID Federation and X509. So what's up here is that there are already a number of organizations out there, and in particular, we're thinking about some European university networks and European governments who want to use OpenID federations to sort of represent like the world of entities within themselves, and also to federate trust between each other. So, so here we have, an illustration of a concrete example of like why you would want to use both at the same time. And the example is Eduroam. So Eduroam is a system composed mostly of universities. And the idea is that it permits like scholars visiting, from one university that are visiting another to join the Wi-Fi network at the institution that they're visiting. So, it's illustrated here is suppose you have a Swedish grad student who is like actually a member of SUNet, the Swedish university network, and they're at a symposium in Greece and they want to join the Wi-Fi network on that campus. So the way that Wi-Fi authentication works is it might be, using the Radius protocol, and the way that you authenticate to that is you present an X509 client cert. Okay, but what cert shall our poor student present? Well, what we're proposing, right? The idea is if GRNet and SUNet have established mutual trust using OpenID Federation's mechanisms, then you could imagine that there's an ACME CA, not a WebPKI CA, it's not issuing TLS certs, but an ACME CA. And then the Swedish grad student would get a cert from that, proving that the grad student proves that they're a member of the Swedish University Federation. The ACME CA goes, yep, my federation, federates with that one, so I trust you. It gives the student a cert, and the cert can now present that to the Wi-Fi access point and authenticate. So this is what's realized in draft DeMarco ACME OpenID Federation 01. So its job is to issue certificates, which attest to the idea that the subject is a member of an OpenID Federation. And concretely, what it does is define a new ACME identifier type for OpenID Federation, a challenge type that's used to prove control of such an identifier. And so that's sort of the ACME side of what that document does. And then there's sort of an OpenID Federation side where it defines OpenID Federation entity types for the ACME issuer and ACME requester. That's basically mechanisms for sort of either side of the ACME protocol to advertise some metadata necessary for the other side to, either request or issue certs. Okay. Now, we were on the agenda last time around at 123, but there wasn't enough time for the presentation. However, we did circulate this draft on lists and a few months ago now. And at that time, we got a bunch of excellent feedback, which we've incorporated into draft 01, which is up on the data tracker now. So in particular, I want to thank Aaron Gable and Mike for the time that you put into giving us some great advice. So we've significantly reorganized the document. The goal here was to match the layout of RFC 8737, which, if memory serves, is the IP address identifier one. And the other big piece of feedback we got is that the document that we had was sort of burdened with explanatory material on both what ACME is about and what OpenID Federation is about. The difficulty here is that this document has an audience, right, of people coming from the ACME world who know all about X509 but have no idea what OIDF is, and people coming from the other side, right, who know all about JOTS and OpenID Federation, but maybe aren't super up to speed on X509. So what we did is took all that material that was restating some bits of ACME, and we punted it to an appendix. So the goal here is we want to keep this around while we're editing the draft to sort of bootstrap people into understanding the big picture, but we would delete it from like the final released RFC. Yeah. Right, and that's the other big thrust of what we've changed since draft 0, which is to keep this document focused on its exact job, right? Which is just defining an ACME identifier type and a challenge mechanism. Additionally, there was previously some discussion of this notion of discovery, of how a requester finds an issuer. We improved that by actually essentially removing it from the document. The notions of discovery in question, it's OpenID discovery, excuse me. It is the job of OpenID Federation to spell out how that works. Like this document, it should just be making references to that. So the less we say, the less chance of a conflict, right, or contradiction with the upstream specifications. For similar reasons, we deleted everything we had to say about revocation because, again, as this room knows, painfully well, any sort of application or system that uses X509 certs already has mountains of text discussing how revocation works. And this little draft wouldn't be doing anybody any favors by adding requirements or, further complicating the rules. So we have some implementation work. In tandem with doing the draft, we implemented the client in Lego, which is a pretty popular Go ACME client. We implemented the server side in Pebble. So we have both of those forks up on GitHub. And finally, we have this last project, OIDF box, which is sort of a test harness that we use to spin up little toy OpenID federations and then do like issuances to these sort of ephemeral software entities in there. Stefan, go ahead.
No, I wait till you're done.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're almost done here anyway. So yeah, okay, so we have implementations. Pebble obviously not usable in production, but the protocol does work, like you can issue certs. So, right, risks and next steps. Now, the biggest risk here is that OpenID Federation itself is not finished. It's still being drafted at OpenID Foundation, and the requirements there are somewhat dynamic. That work essentially is being done in the context of like evolving work in the European Commission on digital identity stuff, right? So the OpenID Federation is an important piece of how a number of, I think, European governments are going to like comply with the stuff that's coming down from the European Commission. So as requirements change, OpenID Federation changes, and that of course can have implications on a downstream document like draft DeMarco here, right? So in my view, the way that we mitigate this risk is just to be extremely crisp and clear about what the job of this draft is. So for example, as I discussed before, we just deleted all discussion of discovery. And that means, if we sort of abstractly refer to the discovery mechanism defined by the upstream OpenID Federation document, then we should be okay. Additionally, we probably have a number of editorial improvements to make for clarity. That's going to be based on feedback that we're hoping to get from the working group, because of course, those of us who have been editing this document are sort of too close to it to have a real sense of like whether it makes sense to regular human beings. And another thing that's not on the slide, more recent development, is that I think it was Aaron actually pointed out to me, or David Cook, another colleague of ours. In some ways, this looks a bit like DNS persist in the respect that you're sort of delegating trust from one entity, like from one set of keys to another set of keys, to do a particular kind of issuance. So it might raise the question of like, well, why basically isn't this DNS persist? So I just want to, in anticipation of that question, the main thing is that for this OpenID Federation challenge identifier, DNS may not be in the picture at all. Like the entity getting a cert may not have a DNS name, much less like the ability to put a record anywhere. Past that, like as I understand it, the goal of DNS persist, right, is to enable a requester to get a cert without having access to, say, the sensitive keys that let you modify DNS records. Well, with this stuff, with this OpenID Federation stuff, we already have a way to sort of scope the request down to like keys that are scoped to the entity requesting the cert. Basically, it's the keys of the OpenID Federation identity. That being said, I think what we would want to do is carefully review DNS persist and see if there's like ideas and particularly say security considerations in there that would be applicable also to this, and make sure that we, borrow the relevant notions. Okay. Yep, that's what I have. 4 minutes, good. Please.
Session ends in 6 minutes, right? Is that correct?
What?
I have a 2-hour session. Yeah. Right.
Okay, so I'm actually one of the rare breeds you're looking for. I'm a former PKIX chair and deeply involved in the conclusion of OpenID Federation 1.0. So I'm rooted in both worlds. I have some questions when reading through this, and please feel free to stop me and say, like, take this to the list. I don't know, we can talk about this on the list, but the first question when I'm looking at the request, you're saying you should send a chain. I feel that there is a lot of simplification made if you, I don't understand why you have to send a chain, or why you feel that's an advantage to send the chain in the request response.
Yeah, that's something actually we've been debating amongst the editors. The thing that's challenging about that, hang on, let me see if I have a backup slide that helps make sense of this. Okay, yeah, good. So this slide actually illustrates the exchange between requester and issuer. And I believe what you're referring to, it's essentially in the challenge response from the requester. Yeah, in optionally, the requester can present an OpenID Federation trust chain. The reason that that's risky is that it's not obvious that the requester can figure out what's a trust chain that the issuer is going to like, right? Like the requester would have to have knowledge of what are the trust anchors that the issuer has. So it might be that we want to remove that from the draft, but certainly, yeah. So I suppose I agree with you. Go ahead.
So let me explain. So the reason why I don't think even the requester has to know anything about the issuer's preferred path is that we defined resolvers in OpenID Federation pretty long time ago now, and a lot of work that is coming from OpenID Federation seems to ignore the feature of the resolver. So the issuer can use a resolver to get everything, and including the trust chain from that source. So it can build its own resolver. So it doesn't have to rely on, or the requester doesn't even have to know what the issuer is. So I was wondering if you have thought through that. So, and we're not going to resolve that right now unless you have a specific
I don't.
answer. Okay, good. So the other question is why you're defining a specific key for ACME instead of using the OpenID Federation entity key?
So, hang on, there is a cogent argument for that, and I'm trying to page it back in. I think it's a crypto hygiene thing, right? We just want to make sure to use different set of keys for a different purpose, and it allows.
Because there is a problem inherited in that, and it's like a flaw in 1.0 in OpenID Federation, that they made an entity type equals to the type of metadata you have, and now you define a new entity type, which is a ACME client that is going to mess up a lot of things in how you request and filter things on entity type. But that's another thing. So I'm just wondering if that would be a very important thing to you, to have a specific metadata type for ACME, because it seems not to be in line with what OpenID Federation designed metadata types for. Okay, so also, why do you have to use OpenID Federation as a client to configure the issue? Couldn't it be open to have like any way you want to, but this is an option?
Well, hang on. Okay, the thing that the issuer is verifying is that the requester is in a federation, right?
Yeah,
so
but it requires the client to use OpenID Federation to get the directory link to do the configuration. That seems to be an option. Well, that might be too details.
That's one of the discoveries. Go ahead.
The last question is, now we open up for issuing a certificate that contains a lot of different information that you pull from OpenID Federation. That's going to be put into CSR, where the issuer is going to match what's in the CSR to what's in the OpenID Federation record. Is that then open for building whatever profiles you want to match that?
Yeah.
Or
so
that's outside the scope of
another backup slide. This draft does not specify issuance profiles or certificate profiles, because the expectation is that like specific applications will need who knows what kind of particular CNs or SANs or whatever. The only thing we intend to do is define a new subject alternate name type so that a SIN issuer could put an OpenID Federation entity identifier in a cert if it wanted to.
Yeah.
But otherwise, this draft will not the goal is not to impose like a certificate profile.
Okay. So I just end with saying that I think this work is very, very important. I'm working in the European wallet concept, and this might be a really key things if we do it right. And I'm happy to contribute a little bit more actively.
Great. Well, you already have a bunch. Thank you.
I'd like to do a time check. So we are past the time slot for this talk, but we're generally running fast on the agenda, so I'm happy to let this continue.
Thank you. Jan Friedrichs from DFN Germany, so EduRoam operator for Germany. You said EduRoam as an example use case, but I think EduRoam is essentially exactly not what happens here or what is it is useful because EduRoam already has a federation. So I would still in that case use my certificate issued by SUNET to connect to GRNet because we have already a federation. So I think this is.
So the way I'm going to weasel out of this is to underline hypothetical. I know that this came up when we were reviewing the slides, but like this is a simple example that makes sense. But I agree. It's not obvious. It's not obvious that EduRoam would actually literally use this.
Yeah.
So the thing that we had in mind was like it's something somewhere in the bowels of the architecture reference framework. It was like the certificates that the hardware manufacturers get to blah 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 blah, and it got deleted somewhere between. Long story.
Yeah, so I think the thing here is I want to have a federation, but I want to issue the certificate locally anyway, because I don't trust any third party or something. But yeah, in EduRoam, we already have this trust relationship. I just didn't want to leave this there as EduRoam person.
Fair enough, thanks.
Thank you.
May I say one more thing?
Please.
We are, right, so just to put it on the record, we are kind of hoping the working group will adopt this.
We'll get to there at the end. Mike Elmsworth, comment as an individual. So I read this draft. As you said, this is we're blurring knowledge domains here between PKI and OpenID Federation. So as a PKI guy, this slide gets at something that I found extremely confusing in reading the draft, which is the name validation, which is this OIDF bundle, which to me is all foreign. How are you validating the names that are being requested? And it wasn't clear to me whether the certs that are being requested are server certs or whether they're human certs or client certs. In this picture, it looks like you're issuing a cert to a human. And if we're issuing a cert to a human, ACME is an interesting way to do that. I don't know if you can add any clarity to, and maybe the answer is it doesn't matter. Maybe the answer is for ACME purposes, it doesn't matter whether these are humans or clients or servers, but because that's all taken care of by this OIDF bundle. But to me, I found that I couldn't make sense of the draft without wrapping my head around what we were trying to issue.
Okay, so the point of the challenge here is for the requester to prove that they control an OpenID Federation entity identifier. And like, yeah, I guess to some extent you have to understand what an entity identifier is and what an OpenID Federation entity could possibly be. What I would argue, though, and this is what I was getting at here when I said like we got to keep this focused on its job, is I very much want to avoid redefining OpenID Federation concepts in this draft because I will get it wrong, right? I want Stefan and Giuseppe and others to do it properly. So I get like obviously the draft needs to be readable, but yeah, we have to avoid stepping on the toes of upstream documents.
So I think the thing you need to do, because you're obviously bringing this to ACME for a reason, because this working group has expertise that you want review from, right?
Sure, yeah, and I mean, more cynically, we need code points for an identifier and or a challenge, right?
All right, chair hat on. You're bringing this document because there's experts here that I would like to get security review
Absolutely.
from.
And we already folks in the room provide that.
Which means the draft needs to provide enough context that the PKI people can understand the security implications of the protocol modification you're trying to make to ACME, right? So you probably need to explain enough of that OIDF gobbledygook that the PKI people can understand the security implications and the validation implications.
Yeah, excellent point. We definitely want to do that.
I'm confused with a question.
Sure.
Just what we're talking about. Sorry.
So I'm gonna help.
Yeah, so the concept is like this. So you have an identifier. That's an arbitrary identifier. by proving that you are the owner of that identifier, it also proves that all these statements in OpenID Federation is true for you. Now you have a collection of data that you can put into CERT. So by this mechanism, you prove that I'm the one that have this identifier, which also means that I'm associated with all of these attributes. So now you have a collection of data about me. It could be anything. So it could be a domain name, but it's not there for a domain name. It's about for any other information and identity that put into CERT. That's why I'm asking for, how do you compare what you put in the CERT request to what's in OpenID Federation, because that's different formats.
So maybe for a reader like me, just a simple worked example, dummy example or something would help clarify.
Yeah, so our answer to that was, like I said, we do have some explanatory material. We punted it all to an appendix, but like we can certainly work on improving that. You're exactly the reader that we have in mind for that stuff.
So Kathleen Moriarty, I think I was the AD at the beginning of the time of ACME. I don't know if I was the AD for it at the very start. And so I think some of the misconceptions, like this type of work fits in with the original vision for ACME. And I don't think that's necessarily clear that client certs, different cert types were supposed to be possible, different challenge types were supposed to be possible. So what you described in this fits along with what the original vision, and I have the ACME client draft, right? And so people have been struggling with the idea of these other challenge types, these non-web certificates. But the original intent was to allow for these types of use cases. So I just wanted to state that. I mean, you can go back to the beginning and dredge up stuff if that's still a hurdle for anyone in the room.
So just to be clear on my own point, Kathleen, I wasn't trying to say this was out of scope. I was trying to say that to understand the context of the security considerations, there's maybe some.
No, it's just you did state it once, and you've been stating that to me over and over again, that it's a problem with the ACME client draft. And for the original intent, this type of thing and the ACME client draft fit in with the original goals for ACME, that you could have other challenge types. And if you go back to the published ACME document, it says you could change out the CSR so that you could have other certificates issued.
So it was a supportive comment.
Thank you.
Trying to help with potential hurdles.
Michael Richardson, I haven't read your document, but I will. It looks interesting. So my suggestion, and I think that we tried to articulate one of these use cases in the RATS, our ACME document that I hope Peter will be here any minute to talk about. One of the use cases we discussed, and I think it fits better than your EduRoam case, was a outsourced maintenance person who shows up at a, I don't know, let's say a 3G tower to fix it. Doesn't work for whatever, the company's outsourced 2 layers down. Okay. And to fix it, he's going to have to get on the network there, the Wi-Fi. Okay. That's maybe just for there. And maybe the tower is completely toasted, like the fiber is broken. That's what he's there to fix. There's no internet. And he would like to have a credential that gets him into the network right there without having the network having to be active. But we're also not handing out WP PSK passwords because that's just not scalable for people that come and go. So this actually fits, I think, very, very well into it because it's completely, the resulting certificate is completely evaluatable. Is that the right word? Validatable locally. Whatever you have to do the thing. And when you come to, whatever maintenance.org, and I can get they would set up a federation, and then when they get the contract to do the maintenance, then there would be an added relationship. And I think that all works. Does that fit into your space?
Yeah.
And I think that's a much better scenario. And I think it addresses, there was recently a, dumpster fire or something about elevator maintenance, freezer maintenance people, where they were remote accessible and it was all admin. Why? Well, because anything else was not going to scale to the random people that show up to fix your freezer at your restaurant. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else was going to basically break. And what were their choices? it was admin and min, right? That was it. And this goes a great step to fixing that. So
Yeah,
I'm
right.
really interested in it.
So like
Yeah.
the use case would be, say, imagine any appliance you have, right?
Yes.
That hasn't received enough software update since 2007 and never will. The only thing you get to do is configure, sorry, and it insists on X509 for authentication. The only thing you get to do as an operator is configure the root store.
Yeah.
So then you can plop in the root store of the ACME CA that's doing OpenID Fed. You can use whatever issuance profile you want, so you can construct some like gnarly messed up cert that exactly, precisely has all the OUs and gobbledygook that the appliance wants. And yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, so I would suggest that's actually it's the killer app use case that the industry is dying, or industries that don't even know they have this problem are dying for this. So let's go. Yeah, good.
Cool. Thank you.
Quick point. I'm going to cut the queue on technical discussion after Stefan and after Aaron, and then I'd like to get to the adoption question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just quickly want to give you the major current use case that with high stakes right now, and that's the European Wallet project. So in this project, we're going to have to register all the relying parties in all European countries for European wallets. Like in Sweden, that's at least 10 to 25,000 entities. So it turns out that the perfect vehicle for that allows us to do delegated registration is OpenID Federation. So that's where we're going to collect all the information. Now the EU forces us to issue a certificate for each one of those relying parties based on the information we have registered in OpenID Federation. This gives us a perfect tool to just have everyone using an ACME client to get their certificate. They're going to produce their identity. We're going to verify they are the entity under that identity using this protocol here. And then we have access to all the data about that entity that can be put into CERT and shipped back to them automatically. So that's like the vehicle we need in order to turn the registered information into certs that are required by the European Commission. So this is a huge thing that needs to be resolved for this to work.
Aaron.
Yeah, really quick. I was just going to say the exact same thing for this draft as for the JWT claim constraints. Like all of the ACME wire protocol stuff, how you talk about identifiers, the name of the challenges, all that sort of stuff is great, fantastic. And the people in this room, myself included, have a hard time reviewing the guts of the description of the challenge. Okay, given this input, what am I supposed to do in order to confirm that the applicant presenting that input to me actually controls the identifier represented by that input? And like that's just the fundamental problem here, is that like the ACME group is really good at reviewing extensions to the ACME protocol, but all of these extensions come with their own environment specific validation routines, and we just need to get more practice gaining knowledge of those specific environments so that we can understand whether the validation routine is well specified. And we need to pull in domain experts from those other environments. Like we need OIDF people looking at the validation routine here going, is this correct? Does this make sense?
Well, like the way that that's going to play out, the specific, say, paragraph that you're referring to, what it's going to say, what I sincerely hope it'll say is like, the issuer validates, some condition, and it does so using the procedure described in section, X.Y in the OpenID Federation specification, right? Because I don't want to duplicate that in this draft. So like the unfortunate thing is, implementers are going to have to go follow that cross-reference. And that seems perfectly natural to me.
Okay, so that drains the queue. Yoav, I'd appreciate your input here. I hear intent to work on this document. I hear there's interest. I hear the working group would like to spend time and effort working on this. So we'll go to the list for a formal call for adoption. Does anyone in the room object to adopting this? Anyone in the room want to speak out against adopting this document? Otherwise, we'll take it to a call for adoption.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Okay, seeing no one. Yeah. we'll do a call for adoption
I mean, you can do a show of hands if you like.
on the list.
Has to be confirmed on the list anyway.
Has to be confirmed on the list.
Yeah.
Anyway. Let's
Yeah,
go
so
to
let's go to the list. Yeah.
Thanks everybody for your time and for all the insightful contributions.
Okay, next, David Ben, profile sets. That is the clicker. Am I doing? Am I changing the slide set?
No, I uploaded something.
Sorry, Yoav, are you changing the slide set, or am I changing the slide set?
I'm not touching the slides. You want me to?
I think I have to take it back from the clicker. Sorry, this is all
Yeah.
stop, go, buttons, click. That's great. And then I need to assign the clicker. All right, go ahead.
Well, I foolishly made a little animation, so I've got to have a clicker. All right, so this is a small draft that I sent to the list probably a few weeks ago or something, very much at the last minute. All right, so testing. Hello. Okay, so you are spinning up a TLS server or whatever, and you need to get a cert. Well, that's pretty straightforward. You find a CA that the client. Oh, I can see the screen. You find the CA the client trusts, get a cert from them, move on. All done. We can go home. Oh, yeah, but the problem is there's more than one client out there. Oh, yeah, ECDSA is smaller. Let's go add some ECDSA routes to our clients. Sure, be nice if we could use that one. Oh, whoops, that key got compromised. We're going to go replace that key and make a new one. Actually, that CA operator is like also just untrustworthy. You got to get rid of them. That key is getting kind of old. Let's rotate it. We're going to replace all of them with post-quantum. Are you kidding me? That TV shipped only one CA to ship on size, and we like can't update it at all? Ugh. And sure, okay, so like in principle, all of these are older clients and they should all update to the newest one. But as anyone who has run a server on the internet knows, old clients last forever in the limit. You probably still have to support browsers from like 5 years ago, or that TV set-top box that's just never gonna get updated. So sometimes you just need to have a handful of certs and send a different one to each client. And this way you can send the thing the TV wants to the TV, you can get the ECDSA one where you can go do the post-quantum one for the post-quantum folks and so on. But now you as a server operator have to go figure out which certs you want to get. And that means keeping track of what is going on in this messy ecosystem. It'd be nice if we could let the ACME server help. So this draft just takes the profiles draft and extends it slightly with probably needs a better name, but profile sets, where we just stick right next to the list of profiles, a list of named profile sets that are collections of profiles that are defined by the ACME server. As the ACME server finds, oh, there's this new relying party, they need to do this thing, or we're rotating keys or whatever, they can go add to that list. And then the ACME clients, if they are configured with this profile set, they'll just spin up, like make, say, 2 orders in parallel. And then as the certs expire, they'll get new ones. If they find that the set has changed, then they'll get a new cert as they need it, and so on. And so hopefully this means that we can have the ACME clients outsource the problem of figuring out how to navigate this ecosystem to the ACME servers. Why the server? Well, in most ecosystems, there are many more parties that are presenting certificates than there are ACME server operators. The ACME server operators are often the CAs or resellers or certs. They're very close to the PKI, so they have a good sense of how the PKI changes. Oh, now's when we made a new key. Oh, now we got this post-quantum stuff. And so hopefully we can, once all the clients have support for this and whatnot, we can use this to help automate PKI transitions, get them to complete more quickly, more smoothly, and we can get the security benefits we were trying to get out of the transition more smoothly. So next steps. This was sort of the dumbest possible design. We just put the list in the directory and then we go let the ACME client deal with it. This is pretty nice in that it avoids changing the ACME state machine. We've been talking a bit about like, should they instead be multiple results in one order? That has some nice things, but it means that you change the ACME state machine more. Maybe the JSON spelling should be different. I don't know. In its current form, it's very small. So maybe rather than a separate draft, it should just get folded into this draft, or maybe folks want a more complicated thing. I don't know. Thoughts?
Feels like a stupid question, but how do you get old, not updated clients to participate in a new protocol?
When you say clients, do you mean the TLS clients or do you mean the ACME clients?
The ACME clients.
You don't. So this is this is like designing for the next generation of transitions we have to do. Like the current generation, we don't have this sort of thing. But yeah.
Aaron, this slide has your name on it.
It approximately does. Yeah, David, Ben, and I have been talking about this a lot. I think there's an open question of whether this should be part of the extant profiles draft or a separate document that follows that. Yeah, like we're bringing this as a separate draft here so that the rest of the working group can help advise on that.
I'm not seeing much enthusiastic opinion in the room, so the opinion of the authors maybe ends up winning.
All right.
Well,
Figure out what the
there's
opinion of the
one
authors is.
opinion I'll volunteer to win. I actually would prefer them as two documents, I think, because I think there's a lot of interesting things to say about profile sets that we're going to discover that are a little bit more complicated than just we have a bunch of profiles. And so I expect the profiles document to have a longer and more interesting discussion. And I would not like that to hold up shipping just the profiles document on its own. So
Makes sense.
+1 to the previous, mostly because when I looked at the profiles doc and Aaron's description of that, it's like, why aren't we just shipping this? It's done. And yeah, this stuff will come out of plants for this too. So we should just open this up and not delay the other one.
Stay tuned for the next meeting.
So this slide does not have the word adopt on it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we wanted a separate doc. I guess if we want separate doc, we can pretend I put the word adopt on it.
Okay. Do I just add that to my to-do list right now, or do you send me an email when you're ready?
I mean, there's not much of this document, so I'm ready as far as I don't know, whatever you think works best.
Okay. I'll add it to my to-do list. Circle up with my co-chair. What is this profile sets? Okay, I think that's, thank you. Anything else on this document, or do we thank David? I think we thank David. Thank you, David.
All right.
Peter.
Hi, thank you. I was secretarying SETP at the other room, so thank you for putting me at last. Thank you. Cool, I can write minutes for them. Right. Oh, this Thank you. Yeah, I'm here to give updates to the ACME RATS draft. So it's a refresh, like what is this draft about, is to grant certificates to device that passes security checks, AKA, pass attestation. In this process, we kind of separate the attestation process and the ACME process. So when we pass the attestation to a device, for example, a smartphone, we could use this attestation result to give it to the ACME server, and it will verify this attestation result and then give a certificate back. So this is also a refresh to the use cases. We have two major use cases. The number one is to grant internal network access to enterprise employees We mentioned this use case in the last IETF, and power company inspector would visit many campuses or substations, and it will connect to its small Wi-Fi and download data and go to the next substation. So this process will be again and again. So we listed several reasons that using password is a bad idea, and doing this manually is a bad idea. And even though manage the password through MDM might be a bad idea. So this the best way is that we could do this in ACME RATS way and connect to the Wi-Fi through EAP-TLS. And the other use case is for ACME server to put a security policy on the ACME client. In this case, the server would be a cloud domain host service provider, and the client would be a domain owner tenant. And the server would like to know the certain security attributes of the platform or the private key. So the changes from last IETF, we had one design meeting, and we discussed a lot of comments and issues raised from the last IETF. We closed 4 PRs and 2 issues. The first PR is to update the use case to be more specific. The second one is the identity challenge. We changed it to the identifier to the trustworthy identifier with a constant value, trustworthy, and can be used along with other challenges. This used to be the identifier would be the RATS identifier, and the challenge type would be RATS challenge type. And now the challenge type would be 2 types that depends on the attestation model that you're trying to use. We have 2. The first one is attestation result, which is purely just verify your attestation result, or you do a background check, which is attestation evidence. And also here, the fourth PR is to make the encrypted evidence optional if you want to do a background check, because sometimes the ACME server is not the verifier. It has to forward the encrypted evidence to the verifiers. And the current story, I think after several IETFs, is currently kind of close to a initial completion. Right now, we have the identifier to be the trustworthy identifier with a constant string of trustworthy, and 2 challenge types, 2 new challenge types, the attestation result and the attestation evidence. So the current story is a 7-step process. The number 1 is this is also about design choices. So the first step is to, during the certificate order creation step, the server would send a /new order GWS request with a trustworthy identity to the array that must not be the only identifier. And the server would return a order object with the identifier and a random authorization string. And this authorization, the client would access each authorization object from the URLs because there could be many authorization challenges. And the client would use the ACME token from the authorization object as a RATS nonce, and using this freshness nonce to do the remote attestation. And the client would include the nonce to produce RATS evidence and /post attestation result to the challenge URL. And then the server would receive the attestation result, verify the signature, wait for other challenges if they are required, and finalize the order and retrieve the certificate. So this is the current story that we have several discussions. How do we combine identifiers, and how do we make the, should it be, in the pre-authorization? Should we, separate them? And this is the current story. So there are a few closed design decisions where to carry attestation results. We used to discuss, should we put it in the new order payload or pre-authorization? Now we change this to /post attestation result to challenge URL. This is the first thing. And the second is that where should we pass the attestation freshness nonce? Now it's inside of the authorization object. And the third one is to, if the server wants to require attestation to one or few specific claims, where should it pass such requirements? The answer is in the challenge object, there will be optional list of string. that says attest claims hint. And the fourth one is that how does the ACME server trust the attestation result generated by the verifier? It must, they must establish some trust relationship or have installed a trust anchor. And the detail of this part is out of scope of this document. So open issues for discussion. Right now we have thought about, because there are two things that may require some discussion. Is that the first one is the format. Should we use JOT or COT format for passing the evidence or attestation results? And then number two is that what should be the preferred attestation model, passport model or background check? And should we do them all? Should we choose some of them as mandatory and some of them as optional? And right now, as a draft author, I want to keep all of them to adapt to different use cases scenarios. But as implementers, because right now I mostly care about the smartphone accessing Wi-Fi use case, so the JOT and passport model will be the most useful for me as an implementer. But this depends on what does the working group think. If you need a background check model or a COT for a resource restrained situation very urgently, please yell at this time. Otherwise, our suggestion is to adopt the document right now and finish the JOT plus passport model first. And then finish, which is currently at this stage pretty much finished by now, and then finish the CBOR token and background check model later. Any suggestions for this one?
Before we start with the queue, which is still empty, I see that it's supposed to be standards tracks, so other implementations?
No, it's trying to do a hackathon the next IETF.
I'll note I'm an author on this, so I'm recusing myself from all consensus calls. Yoav will handle. Procedurally, implementations are not required for adoption, but they would be required for publication on the standards track. Encouraged for
encouraged. Yes, it's only encouraged. And the other question is, your suggestion is to adopt. So you are asking for adoption soon. Am I correct?
The authors believe this is mature enough for adoption, speaking as an author. Yeah. We do have a queue.
Okay, so let's go with Aaron.
This is a fairly minor textual thing, but in the document itself, in section 2.3 describing the authorization object, the example there gives an authorization where the challenges have type trustworthy, but later in the document it defines a challenge type attestation result 01 and a challenge type attestation evidence 01. Those are the values that should be in the challenge type field inside the authorization. So there's still some sort of fundamental confusion about what the various objects within the ACME protocol look like, it feels like. But I think the intent is clear.
Michael, I'm sorry, Aaron. Yeah, we renamed it. So yeah, I missed that example. And I understand exactly what you're saying. Thanks.
Sweet.
If you're having difficulty getting implementations for both passport and other one, should this be split so that at least you can have implementations for one of them and move forward and not be waiting on part of this draft as you don't have implementations for?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, that's why we kind of recommend to have the passport model, because it's easier. You just have to verify a signature that you have already installed Trust Anchor to. But the background check, includes forwarding of encrypted evidences and discovering who to forward to. So that's a little bit more. Right. So yeah, I agree to what you suggesting.
Yeah, as an author, I think I also agree. The background check model is more complicated because you assume there's PII in there. So it's a more complicated use case. Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. Okay. So chair hat on, I suppose, for all the documents discussed today. I'm tracking 4, I believe, that are requesting calls for adoption. So my co-chair and I will have to circle up and figure out what order and what capacity we think we can take these at.
I think there's still one with you, Bob.
No, sorry,
That was
Bob's
sorry,
done, and I've done. Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thank you. So should we issue a call for adoption in the mailing list, or should we issue a call for adoption in the mailing list, or am I missing anything?
I have noted in my chair spreadsheet that the authors have asked for a call for adoption. Yeah, you came into the meeting late. There's a bunch of stuff today that asked for a call for adoption.
Okay.
If we're going to split into documents, we should do that first. Yeah, Yoav and I need to circle up after this meeting and decide which things we're doing call for adoptions for in which order. And this is one of them.
Cool.
So have we reached the any other business part of the meeting?
We have indeed. Going.
Doesn't look like there's a lot of other business. No. Everyone who had business before this working group has already asked for adoption, so they're just waiting on us.
Okay, well, if there is no other business, then we call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.